Peter Levy.
Good afternoon and welcome to our special guest this afternoon. Many happy returns, Peter Levy.
Thank you very much indeed. Very, very kind. And if I can just briefly say, thank you for all the messages. I've had so many today. It's been unreal. I can't read them all out, but I just want to say thank you. It's been really, really fantastic. Really fantastic. And it just made my day. I
don't want to tug on the heartstrings in the first 10 minutes, but you seem as overwhelmed, Peter, as I've ever seen you today.
I am a bit because I wasn't really expecting to get so many messages, and I wasn't expecting the kindness from people here. So it's took me by surprise a bit, but it's been fantastic, and it's lovely. So thank you very much indeed.
Well, happy birthday.
Thank you.
We're going to talk about your life and your career. And on programmes like this, I think it makes sense to almost go chronologically through. So take us back. Kent born, but very much Cornish bred.
Yes, born in Kent, in Farnborough in Kent, and lived in the London area. And then when we, as a family, I was about 7 or 8. The family moved. Mum and Dad, me and my sister, moved to Cornwall, and we lived there. And I went to primary school in Cornwall, and then on to secondary school in Truro in Cornwall, and that's where I lived. During that time, my mum and dad split up when I was very young. I would have been about 9 or 10. And in those days, of course, it was unheard of. You know, today you go into a classroom and a good 50% probably have got parents that are split up, but it was unheard of. So it was quite a difficult time. My dad left, and he went back up country, as they call it, from Cornwall, and I stayed in Cornwall and went to secondary school. But as I say, it was so unusual at that time. I can remember being at school and not, you know how your kids come back, your mates come back to your house and everything, and I always dodged that. You know, I always made an excuse because I didn't want them to come back and see that I've got no dad, just a mum and everything. But you know, that was it. You get through it like you do. And I went to secondary school. I failed my 11 plus. I was bad at school. I went to secondary school. Never really got on with school at all. But got through it. I didn't enjoy school, and I was certainly not very good at school. The one thing I was telling this story the other day, that the one thing I remember from school was I always got picked. You know, you have a lesson to read first thing in the morning in front of the class, and I was always being asked to read the lesson much more than other boys in the school. It was a boys' school. And I always thought it was, payback for being naughty and being troublesome. But of course, when I look back now, when I see what I did for my career and reading aloud, etc., it was obviously because they thought, he reads aloud quite well, so the lesson's not going to be too embarrassing. So I read so many of those, but I was no good at school, and often was in trouble, but got through it.
And yet you always speak very fondly of Cornwall, so despite what you've said, very much home. Yeah, no,
I love Cornwall. I love the place. My dear sister still lives there, and my nephew and his wife and their children are still there. I lost my mum a few years ago, but I love Cornwall. It's a lovely place.
One anecdote you have shared with me before is your bus journey to school, and out of everything, how that might have had an impact on what you've done.
It had a huge impact. I think I remember telling you before, it was about a 45-minute drive. I lived in a little village called Mount Hawke near St Agnes, and the school I went to was in Truro, and I had a 45-minute bus ride into school. And my pride and joy, the one thing, and we didn't have that much money, but the one thing I did have was a transistor radio. That was my pride and joy. In the evenings, of course, in the bedroom, under the cover, listening to Fab 208, Radio Luxembourg. creaking through on medium wave. But on the trip to school, I'd have the radio by the window, and I would listen religiously to Tony Blackburn. Tony was and is a hero of mine. He inspired me, I think, with radio. I fell in love with radio because of Tony, and I used to listen every single morning and loved it. So I owe Tony a lot, really.
You can tell it's a special programme because we've got permission to play some of your song choices. Shall we have the first one, Peter? Well, what have you picked and why?
Well, I picked Downtown by Petula Clark, not only because I absolutely love the record, but it was also the first record I ever played on the BBC. I'd worked at, we're jumping around a little bit, but immediately before going to the BBC, I worked at a radio station in Leeds called Radio Air. And that was on Kirkstall Road in Leeds. And then I joined Radio Leeds, which was right in the centre of Leeds. And I'd resigned from Radio Air to join the BBC, and the radio station, they accepted it. They weren't necessarily overjoyed. But the headline in the evening paper was Peter Levy goes downtown. And of course that tied in with my love of Petula Clark and Downtown, and it was the first record I ever played on the BBC.
BBC Radio Humberside with Petula Clark and Downtown.
Something's in the air.
Peter Levy
On Radio Air.
I must thank, before I forget to at the end, the wonderful Stephanie Hurst, who...
I wondered where you got these from.
As well as being an absolute top radio turn, has probably got the biggest radio archive in the UK, and she has been a diamond to me this week, and there's lots to come. Peter, there's lots to come.
Well, she's very sweet digging that out, because I mean those are jingles from my commercial radio days, and I haven't heard that for years.
As I say, more to come. We're going to talk a little bit, just because I think it's worth mentioning before we get onto radio. How on earth did you sort of transition from this young lad in Cornwall to doing a bit of acting? And you're on some big programmes, to ending up being behind the microphone. That's maybe a programme in itself, but if you can just sort of explain that, Peter.
Well, in a nutshell, while I was at secondary school, I lived with my mum and my sister. And then during the school holidays, as soon as I'd finished school, I was 15, I went and stayed for a couple of weeks with my dad in London. And I... much to the fact I upset my mum, but I said I want to live in London, I want to live with Dad, and I left Mum to live with Dad, which created a lot of upset at the time, but I did. And my dad said, you know, you got to go and get yourself a job, you know, you got to work, you can't, you know, and I didn't have any qualifications or anything, so I started doing bits and pieces of like glorified extra work. I got an agent and you know, did little bits and pieces on programs at the time. Nothing major at all, but it was enough to be able to pay my way and do my bits. And while I was doing the little acting jobs, when I got home, instead of, you know, as a 16, 17-year-old, instead of going out with girls, I was coming home and I was lucky enough to have a reel-to-reel tape recorder, and I was making little tape programs. Again, inspired because of those days listening to Tony, and making programs on my little tape. I had 2 tape recorders eventually, and I used to do those in the evening. So during the day I'd get an acting job, and if I wasn't acting, because my dad was quite strict, he said you got to get yourself a proper job. He didn't have any time for the acting stuff and didn't think that was a career. So I went to work in Moss Bros in Covent Garden, in their formal wear department. So in this job you fitted out people in maybe black tails and striped trousers, or all grey, or dinner suits, and these were people that were hiring them. And in that time I was at Moss Bros, I actually met quite a few very well-known people, and fitted them out with evening dress and stuff. The one that sticks in my mind was Brian Ferry. And he came in and he wanted a white dinner jacket, black trousers, black bow tie and all the rest of it. And I didn't really know much about Brian Ferry at the time, because I was only 16, 17, even though they were big. But it was being fitted out for the cover of Another Time, Another Place, the album. And if you look that up, he's on the front in a white tie, looking immaculate, white shirt, black dicky bow, black mohair trousers. And I picked those out and fitted them for him. And I did quite a few well-known people at the time. And my best mate was a chap called Clive. Clive and I were very good friends. He was called Clive Hornby. And I got a job in Bradford, which we were jumping around a bit, but I got a job in Bradford, and he took the mickey out of me. And then a few years later, as an actor, he came and worked in Leeds.
Jack Sugden.
Jack Sugden.
I thought I recognised the name.
And he was a good friend. We lost Clive a few years ago, way too young. Lovely man, very good friend. And he followed me up to Yorkshire, and then we stayed friends.
Let's sort of jump around these commercial radio stations. I know you've told the story of getting in at Pennine and Austin Mitchell and everything quite a lot, so I just want you to just listen to another voice that might take you back a few years.
Hello, Peter. It's Dorothy Box from your early days at Pennine Radio. I first met Peter in the summer of 1975. It was at Capital Radio in London, where Austin Mitchell and Stephen Whitehead, who were two of the people setting up Pennine Radio, were meeting prospective employees, and Peter was one of them. He just took to it like a duck to water. He was really good on air. He was very good. He identified with the people, and behind the scenes he worked. He was so diligent. We worked in a large office, which was very, very untidy with all the presenters, except for Peter, who had a desk in the corner which was immaculate. He had place for everything in its place, and he worked so hard. He prepared himself with the music, going into the library and trying to find music that he wanted to play, pulling out the albums. He researched everyone that he was going to interview, whether it be a pop star, a local councillor, or the greengrocer who came in to talk about the price of apples and pears. He was good with the audience, with phone-ins. He could chat to people. I can't believe it's 50 years ago when we worked together, and just still working and still loving it. Happy birthday, Peter. Have a lovely 70th. Enjoy it.
That's Cocoa and Sweet, which brings us nicely round to calorie values and Pete's Pantry on diet. Oh, the contrivedness. Is there such a word? I don't know. There is from now on. 26 minutes to 10. This morning is the last of my diet features, and we should be looking, first of all, at some common foods again, which dieters seem to get the wrong idea about. As you know, we've looked at several over the past couple of months. First of all, honey. Such an innocent-sounding food, conjuring up happy visions of summer days. But surprisingly, one that health food fanatics regard as a wonderful, healthy cure-all. I don't want to disillusion you, but true honey is less tampered with than a lot of commercial products, but for the slimmer, it's practically all sugar, the stuff that rots your teeth and makes you fat and supplies nothing but calories. How depressing.
Pete's Pantry on Pennine
Radio.
Radio.
The worst thing I have ever heard.
How long did Pete's Pantry last?
Well, the thing is, I don't even remember that. But I mean, that was just truly awful and the most boring bit ever. Can I just say something though? It was so lovely to hear Dorothy Box. Dorothy was the first person I ever spoke to in Yorkshire. I came up on the train, got off the train, walked to the centre of Bradford, and she came out the front door to meet me. And she was the first person I ever spoke to in Yorkshire, and she was wonderful.
You worked at 3 commercial radio stations, and it is probably worth... I mean, this is a programme about you, it's not a programme about radio, but just to give it context, these are 3 really, really big radio stations when commercial radio was enormous. Pennine Radio, Radio City and Radio Air are much loved and much thought about stations still by people who work there as well as their listeners. If we could just talk briefly about Pennine, because that's where this all started. Was it a bit strange for you as this young, rakish individual from London and Cornwall coming up and being dumped in the heart of industrial West Yorkshire?
Well, I got the job when I was 19. I always wanted to work in radio, even though I've been doing this, the acting. My tapes and everything finally played off, and as Dorothy's just told us, got the job. Arrived in Bradford, and right from day one, I loved the north of England. I loved it straight away, and I remember just feeling. I had loads to learn. I had to learn everything because I didn't know, I had to learn all the equipment. I had to learn the art of broadcasting. I had to learn how to operate everything. But it was fantastic. I absolutely loved it. And just so, you've got it clear in your mind, between 75 and 87, I worked at 3 commercial radio stations. And as you say, Pennine was the first one. And I lived had very little money. I couldn't even drive when I first arrived, but got by and loved it.
You were at Pennine and then on to Radio City. How did that sort of come about, and how did you find Liverpool?
I was very happy at Pennine Radio. I was extremely happy. I did 1975 to 1979 at Pennine, which is in Bradford, and then I won an award for the show or for presenting and everything, and then suddenly I got offers from some big stations, and the biggest of these was Radio City in Liverpool, which was huge at that time, and I left Pennine to go to City. I was gutted to leave because it was my first radio job and I was very happy and all the rest of it, but Radio City was a big station, a very important station, and decided to go. And I left, typical Peter Levy style, I left Bradford programme on the Friday and started with a new show in Liverpool on the Monday. I used to do 2 to 6 in the afternoon on Radio City.
I wonder whether it was your time in Liverpool where you first got the taste for the interviewing that we see you now do on Look North on a daily basis, holding people to account, even if it was then pop stars of the day.
But now he's back on record. I'm pleased to say back in Liverpool. Billy Fury, good afternoon. Welcome to the programme.
Hi, good afternoon.
Looking back, it's incredible that you were Britain's most successful recording star with 12 songs in the top 10. Never had a number 1, did you?
No, but I was always very pleased to not to have a number 1, believe it or not.
How to destroy someone with one question. 10 top 10 hits for Billy Fury, straight for the jugular. Question number 1. You've never had a number 1, Billy. Unbelievable, Peter.
That's just awful. But the thing is, what you got to remember is, and I'm not making excuses, but even then I was still very young and was still learning. I was only what would I be, 20, 26, 27, something like that. Was still learning. But the great thing about Radio City was you had to learn very, very fast because you were working alongside very experienced broadcasters and people behind the scenes who knew what they were doing. And I know that there was once or twice where I had to do big interviews with politicians and people like that, and I wasn't as well prepared as I should have been. And I remember them saying afterwards, if you're going to interview somebody about a book, you need to read the book and all the rest of it. And you learn quick. But that was terrible.
We're going to head to Leeds in just a moment, where Peter worked at Radio Air and BBC Radio Leeds and embarked his BBC television journey. But before that, and here's something I've never said on the BBC, in truth, I don't think I ever said it on commercial radio either, but we'll be back after a short break.
Motorists, you can still get around without getting broke. Apple Autopoints are selling 4-star petrol at the crazy price of 63p a gallon, and 2050 oil is only $1.30 a gallon. Hurry while stocks last, and remember they're open 7 days a week. Apple Autopoint, New Line, Green Gates.
Hang on. Oh, come in.
Wow, that's the new Pink Floyd.
Yeah, from Pearson's Records. You save 60 pence. They've some LPs from only 49 pence and 10% off all records.
Pearson's, that small record shop in Rawson Place next to the meat market.
Did you say small? Pearson's is one of the country's top 50 record shops. There's 3 floors, including the bargain basement. The range of tapes is fantastic.
Okay, stop.
Ooh, first time you've asked me to do that.
To Peter Levy, 35. BBC Radio Leeds, Peter Levy.
If you just joined us, good afternoon. We're spending an hour with Peter Levy to mark his 70th birthday and 50 years in broadcasting. Commercial radio, BBC Radio, and of course Look North across East Yorkshire and Lincolnshire for over the last 20 years.
BBC Radio Leeds.
I couldn't have crashed that jingle, Peter. I'd never have lived myself.
Well, I tell you what, those Radio Leeds jingles were really good, weren't they? They sounded almost American. They were good. Can I just say that those awful adverts that I voiced? I mean, they were terrible. But that was when I was. Do you know that they are 50 years old because they were in the very early days of Pennine? Because when we first went on the air, they hadn't got any money to bring in voiceovers. So if an advert wasn't going out in your show, then you could voice it, and I got £3. And everybody used to fight, say, "Oh yeah, I could do that, and it would be an extra £3." Bearing in mind that the salary, and I found the original letter the other day, I was on £2,000 a year. So if you work that out, it's probably about £40, isn't it? 2,000 a year. So every £3 extra booking was good to have.
And yet, it's a 50-year career which has seen you made numerous friends.
Peter! Hello, Peter. This is the Academy of the National Grindleford Brass Band Headquarters, wishing you a very happy birthday. Bit more practice now. Yes, it's a gift. You never lose it. And you're wondering, who on earth is this? Well, I'm part of the investigative team to make sure that your good self and Paul the weatherman are not joined at the hip, because my committee and I are of the opinion that you were joined at the hip and you haven't separated yet. All right, I'll put you out of your misery before I play again. Peter, this is Bernie Clifton saying, "Didn't we have a wonderful time the day we went to Wet Wang?" A very, very happy birthday. And I must say, Peter, you don't look it. You used to. Happy birthday! It's a gift, Peter.
It's a gift. What a lovely man. Bernie Clifton, who...
Yes.
Well, you heard there, Grindleford, I think he was where he lives in the Peak District, but he watches Look North and he watches the programme, and he got in touch with me earlier this year, and he drove all the way from South Yorkshire up to Wet Wang one Sunday morning for the Scarecrow Festival. It was fantastic. Lovely man.
We're already chasing our tails here, Peter. How you squeeze all you squeeze into half an hour on the television, I do not know. But we need to make the jump from commercial radio to the BBC. with all apologies for anybody who was hoping for lots of radio air anecdotes, we kind of need to move you on to how did that sort of come about?
I was at Radio Air for quite a few years, from 81 to 87, and then I got a phone call one day, in a nutshell, from the BBC saying, would I like to join Radio Leeds and the BBC? And initially I said no, and then they took me out to dinner, and I went to a place called the Boston Diner in Headingley, and I was convinced by the gentleman concerned that it was a good thing to do, and it was the best decision I ever made, and I resigned. That's when they got the headline, Peter Levy goes downtown, and I joined the BBC, and that was 1987, and I started doing Look North later that year, bulletins, and I've been doing Look North bulletins ever since. I was 32 then. From 32 to 70.
Well, you heard Peter in his early days at Pennine Radio. Have a listen to see if he'd honed his craft by the time he'd made his way to BBC Radio Leeds.
Well, I've had a lot of public humiliation on the air this morning, not least of which from one of our contestants, and also for this email from Jean. And she says, I heard that young lady mention that you were going through the midlife crisis yesterday morning. I didn't take it too seriously and didn't give it a second thought. And then, an hour and a half later, I saw you on the television wearing a white jacket, dressed as a 19-year-old, and I thought at the end of the bulletin you might sing Saturday Night Fever. I see what she means. Midlife crisis or what? I mean, how cruel is that?
True.
Yeah, what are we?
I think the truth hurts.
You're in serious trouble.
I'd just like to point out that you made a comment earlier with the pontoon quiz about seducing her with a tea cosy. You really don't have the art, do you, Peter?
It's not really one of my better chat-up lines, is it, really?
Not really. I think, is that why you got the sports car?
Don't go there again. Don't go there again.
Now, the lady's voice you heard there is a BBC producer called Sarah.
Is it Sarah Whitten?
It is, yes. And Sarah's had a couple of burdens in her BBC career, both being us two, because she's produced Peter for a long time, and she also produced me for a long time as well. But
she was fantastic, Sarah. She really was.
You're at the BBC. We're going to sort of move on to the telly. It's a whistle-stop tour, is this? But I think now's a good time to get another one of your musical choices. To tell us what you'd like to hear and why.
I've chosen the Eagles' Lying Eyes. When I was at Pennine, I first fell in love with the Eagles. I've enjoyed the Eagles ever since. I still play them regularly at home, and as you will understand, it's quite a long record. So if you've got a long show, it's quite useful.
BBC Radio Humberside with Eagles and Lying Eyes, another one of Peter's picks this afternoon.
Come away with us, spend the day with us. The time quickly passes, so if you like a little fun, there's a place that I know. Make a day with music on the Peter Levy Show.
We're celebrating Peter's 70th birthday and looking back on 50 years in broadcasting. Now, hopefully this will work. It works for you on a daily basis. So I'm hoping it'll work for me if I say, good afternoon, young man.
Yes, indeedy. Happy birthday, Peter. 70 años. I can't count that far. But how are you?
I'm very well indeed. How are you?
And what does it feel like to be in your 70s?
I know.
I mean, you don't look it. I have to say, you don't look it, Peter.
Well,
I mean,
yeah,
I know I rib you, but I don't know what your secret is.
I don't know. I think it's you keeping me young. It's fantastic to hear you. Anyway,
well,
yeah, thank you.
I think it was a bit of a cruel last song. The line, "A rich old man, she won't have to worry." I thought, come on, Richard, that's below the belt.
Hey, listen, it was Peter's. What I must ask you, Paul, is because we're reminiscing, obviously, and at the risk of making this sound like a dating show, how did you and Peter first meet? What's your memories of it?
Well, it's. Do you want to go? Or do you want me to go, Peter?
Well, I'll start because I used to do the lunchtime news every day on the telly in Leeds, and we used to have the weather from a gentleman called Darren Bett. Occasionally Darren was off or on holiday or sick or whatever, and Paul used to stand in. But Paul was always kind enough to come in and see me first of all, say hello, and just say it's me today and all the rest of it. And we just hit it off, and we started doing chit chat, and it just went from there. And then suddenly at lunchtimes there was like a little following, for the fun, because it was something that you didn't see anywhere else on news programs, and it went from there. Was that fair, Paul?
Oh, absolutely, definitely. And I remember, watching Peter myself, and I remember vividly. Peter, tried to have some warmth and banter with Darren. And Darren was always prickly. He's never changed, and he was never having any of it. And I remember a famous end item into the weather. It was about horrendous traffic problems in the Leeds Bradford area. And Peter turned to Darren and said, from the Stanley bypass to the Pudsey turn-off, here's Darren. And everybody in the gallery's laughing their head off. I was in the newsroom and stuff, and Darren just bristled and just went on as if nothing had happened. But that was that was the way Peter was. And as Peter said, I stood in for Darren. Then Darren got the call to go down to London. And at the time I was down at the Met Office in Bracknell, I got a phone call saying, I think Peter had, Peter's too modest to say this, but Peter at the time had been asked if he thought he could think of anybody who could replace Darren. And I think Peter put a word in and he said, there was a guy called Paul, he's now down at the Met Office, why don't you give him a call? So to cut a long story short, the guy in charge of BBC Yorkshire rang up one day and said, would you like it? And it was just a dream come true for me because, first and foremost, I wanted to be a meteorologist, but the idea, at the time I'd not really thought of a career in television, but the idea of doing it in Yorkshire and doing it with Peter was just like a dream come true. And it's just like, any other friendship in the world, really, what it's like with your friends. You either hit it off or you don't, and me and Peter hit it off from day one. And I saw Peter last Sunday, and I said to Peter, what really, really amazes me in a business that has changed so massively in the last, well, certainly the last 10 years, but in the 30 years that we've been doing it, and everything's changed enormously, every aspect of it. But what me and Peter do, having a laugh on television, is just as popular now as it was 30 years ago. So obviously the audience haven't changed that much. It's senior management that think that they have. But I won't get into any controversy because it's it's Peter's birthday. But I mean, that's it in a nutshell. And you remember Peter, Lunchtime Look North. You once had Richard Whiteley on, who in his time was a very big name. And you got Lunchtime Look North, and there's me and Richard Whiteley winding Peter up about one of his exes, Carol Vorderman. And he's just like, there's just like nothing else on television, was there, Peter?
Oh, that is true. Well, that story about being asked if I knew somebody, that is a true story, and it was the best call I ever made. But of course, by the way, the ex about Carol Vorderman, that's not true.
Very true.
That's not true at all, and you know it. That's the type of thing.
Carol, let's bring her in.
That is so not true. And
I was just going to ask about the plastic surgery. I'm glad you're not bringing her in.
Listen, Paul, I just want to ask you one more thing, because we're doing an hour here. We've already discovered we could probably have done 3.
Yeah.
But what do you think is the secret to this man's success?
Well, I don't want to make him blush.
I think you'd more like to make him cry this afternoon.
I once had this conversation. So the boss at the time was Colin Philpott. So at the time, Pete, so as you may or may not be aware, I think you'll be aware, the audience probably aren't aware, that back in the early 2000s, the BBC Look North was a programme that spanned the entirety of Yorkshire, Lincolnshire, the North Midlands. It was a huge area, and Colin Philpott worked really hard with what's he called? Who was the Director General of the BBC? Greg Dyke. So it was his plan to split the region into 2, and it came to pass. And Peter, even back then, was very popular. Colin asked Peter to front this, and I have to say I'll be forever grateful to Peter for this. Peter loved the idea of doing it, but Peter said, I'm not doing it without Paul doing the weather. And at the time, Colin said, well, that's not possible because he does Leeds. Anyway, Peter put his foot down, and he left Colin with no choice in the matter, and that's why the weather's at 6:45. So me and Peter could continue what I did, but in the conversation we were talking about Peter, and obviously I've always looked up to Peter as a broadcaster and a friend, and we were both saying, what's the key to Peter's longevity, because obviously back then he'd done Pennine Radio, the Liverpool Scouse FM, he'd been doing everything, and we both agreed that Peter's just got the common touch, and Peter's never been any different. Peter is just as happy talking to somebody in the Middle Isle in Aldi as he is bumping into royalty at the Great Yorkshire Show or the Lincolnshire Show, and Peter's always had that ability to engage with everybody. And I can say from experience in television that's not always the case as people get on with the careers, and I don't have to describe it, but people do get too big for the boots, and they forget that actually the reason they're popular is because of the people that are sat at home and listening and watching to the output, and Peter to this day is exactly the same as he was back then. As I say, the really amazing thing is that Peter is doing exactly what Peter did 30 years ago, and you look North Hull's viewing figures are the highest of any region in English regions, which is quite incredible. If you just think about that for a minute, Hull Look North is at the top of the tree, and it's hosted by Peter, who does that single-headed. So you got your answer to the question. He's never lost touch with the audience, and I just think that that's absolutely extraordinary.
Thank you ever so much for coming on, Paul. Really appreciate it. Paul Hudson there, who has been Peter and Paul for as long as I can remember. Can we get one more record in, Peter? Is that all right? Can you pick me one more song and tell us why before we sort of wrap things up?
Well, I've chosen Mama Cass, It's Getting Better. It was a big hit in 1969. I've always loved it, even since I was at school, and I loved it when I was doing radio shows, because I thought it was a great record, especially after the news or as a show opener. Great start to it.
BBC Radio Humberside with Mama Cass and It's Getting Better, where time has nearly beaten us with our conversation with Peter Levy. Again, thank you to everybody who sent messages in. We can't possibly read them all out.
Can I say thank you very much indeed. I mean, lovely messages today and cards. Thank you so much. It's been amazing, and I'm really touched, and I'm extremely grateful, as you can probably tell. There's some great stuff on the BBC News website, lovely article about Peter. There's some great stuff on the socials as well. Peter's been out and about as well. I just want to finish off. We've done everything about the last 50 years of your career, 70 years. There's a line in this. We're talking about Hull in the article. I love the city. I love the people. This is where I'll stay post-job. This is where I belong. Well, that's 10 or 15 years in the future, isn't it, Peter? I can't imagine. And there's thousands upon thousands of people who can't imagine not turning on the telly at 6:30 at night. I absolutely love living. Well, I love, first of all, living in Yorkshire, and I've loved my time in Hull. Absolutely love it here. It's fantastic, and I love the people, and I love being here, and I love living where I live. It's amazing, and hopefully I can go on a bit longer. It's home. It's home. Yeah, it's home. I know we talked about a few other places I've lived, Cornwall, Bradford, London, Liverpool, but this is home. I absolutely love it. And hopefully, I'll certainly be staying here, even living in Hull, even when I'm no longer working. And just finally, because it's a big day, and lots have got. I know you've had a little surprise cake. I was going to say thrown at you. Nobody's thrown cake at Peter. Don't worry. There was a little party thrown after Look North. But you'll have worked with some pretty incredible people here over the last 20 plus years as well. Oh yeah, I mean, you're only as good as the team behind you. And Paul was very kind to say those words about the programme. But there's a fantastic team here that care about making local programmes as good as they can, both on the radio, in Lincoln and in Hull, and also Look North. And you're only as good as the people that you work with. It's as simple as that. I love the job. That's no secret. I love being with people. And can I just say thank you very much indeed for a lot of wonderful years, as I say, at the BBC since I was age 32.
And still looks 34. We've loved having you for the last hour. We like the fact you join us every weekday afternoon. We're very grateful for that. We'll play this programme in full on Sunday afternoon between 1 and 2 if you've joined it late. You can listen on BBC Sounds for up to 30 days as well. And of course, look north Monday to Friday, 6:30 with East Yorkshire and Lincolnshire's favourite working pensioner, Mr. Peter Levy. Happy birthday.
Thank you. On the BBC Sounds app, on your smart speaker,
play BBC Radio Humberside,
and on your radio.
The sound of Northern Lincolnshire and East Yorkshire. BBC Radio Humberside.